you have our makavalu process, and makavalu was coined by Antipua. Not necessarily coined, but I feel like she made it famous in my head. Anyway, makavalu is viewing things, maka for eyes, but viewing things on 8 levels. And because the Hawaiian language has so many different definitions, sometimes I feel like I know what my mom is talking about, and I really don't. So we decided for this design process, I think this is our 8th year using the makavalu process now. It's okay, you can pick it up later. What we decided is that we love to take whatever the elements are in our design and break them down into every level that we see fit that relates to this overall project. So starting on the right-hand side, you see Hilo. I feel that there's 2 important things about Hilo. There's, of course, place, and then, the people. People are important. Well, everybody inside this room. I feel like, well, my mom told me way back in the day, I was like, Mom, Hilo people, they really love you in a weird way, Why is it that we go perform and dance hula all over the world, but the hardest people to dance for is Hilo? Sometimes they're not even going to clap for you. And then my mom told me basically, it's like, it's because, son, it's because we had the tsunami, and we had the rain, and we have the volcano. It's just Hilo people are a little hard, but they'll love you hard too. It took me like 10 years to get used to that. Anyway, okay, about the beautiful people of Hilo and the place. Let's start off with place first. Of course, my dad already discussed this, and it's the new moon, it's the beginning, and right now we're at the cusp of the new year, and we're starting it off with the Hilo moon, and just so happened, a coincidence that we're presenting the new downtown Hilo identity today. Secondly is the cliffs, Hilo Paliku. For me, Hilo Paliku is very important because when Punavai Rice, who was my dad's previous partner, they named their graphic design company Paliku Graphics, and it was because of the beautiful view that you have, especially in this Kernan's building. That beautiful view, especially when the sun's hitting it, it's definitely one of the things that makes Hilo unique. But for me, when I saw Paliku Graphics, that's when I realized that graphic design was an actual career. Secondly is the bay, the beautiful bay. The day that we presented this to the association, I was driving home and there's like a beautiful moon, and that moon, when it rises up over there, over the Hilo Hawaiian and Port Naniloa, please hurry up. When it rises over there, that's definitely another thing that makes Hilo so unique. And lastly, binding. This lei that I'm wearing right now is the Helo Braid. And in hula, when we're tying these onto our wrists, what we're doing is we're binding our limbs to the historic stories of the dances. And just on a very simple factor of braiding, even if you're braiding itself, you can be angry in braiding and then your braid's just gonna come out all ugly looking, right? So you have to keep very positive while you're creating this braid. And to me, that's the kind of things that represent bind for me. And that ties into na hilo, lei hilo, piko, as well as lokahi. Now, as far as the people, Hanakahi, Hilo Hanakahi, he was, I think he was like the first Hilo rock star, I think. I mean, there's plenty of them that come through, especially during Merry Monarch time, but I think he was the OG, like real Hilo rock star, but he was the chief, and he was a famous chief of Hilo. Secondly, Ohana. Hilo is a really, really small town, and if you do anything wrong, I'm sure it's gonna get back to my dad really quickly, and he's gonna come to me and wake me up in the morning. That's the beautiful thing about Hilo, is that it's such a small community that we still let people turn. You gotta be courteous on the road because it's such a small town. Secondly, it is the gateway. It's the eastern gateway of Hawaii, and it's the eastern gateway of this island. To me, I just told some people in Oahu the other day at Bishop Museum, I was like, they're like, oh yeah, Big Island is so foggy. It's like, what? I mean, I don't know how you deal with that weather. I was like, oh, you know what the fog is to me? It's a reminder that my island is still alive. And they're like, oh, and it was a little awkward, so I just walked away. Anyway, for me, that is the gateway to Hawaii Island. And lastly, it's the tight-knit community that we have here. And each of those as well as the new moon, the cliffs, the bay, and the binding. Each of those go into Na Hilo as far as the place, the lay Hilo as far as binding, Piko as far as the centering of Hilo, and Lokahi as we all work together. That gives you Hilo Paliku, Hilo One, and Hilo Hanakahi.
Did you know that Mauna Kea doesn't look like Mauna Kea in Kona? I don't know about you Kona people, but Mauna Kea is handsome in Hilo. And I know that when it's thundering and storming and raining and just straight havoc in the winter, I can guarantee you that at 6:30 in the morning, you're gonna see everybody down at Coconut Island taking pictures of Mauna Kea because of how handsome he is. That, to me, is Hilo. But also, for me, this is the representation of being Hawaiian. We came here from Tahiti. The first thing that we saw was the mountains. And no matter if it's a triangle shape, it's the same triangle shape as the pyramids, it's the same triangle shape as on Ohekapala, as is the same majestic triangle shape as Mauna Kea. And so for me, every time I'm coming home, Mauna Kea is my greeting home. And the fact that Mauna Kea looks like Mauna Kea, from Hilo's point of view, this is definitely the signature of Hilo for me. I just wanted to bring this up really quickly before we actually move on. This braid right here that was given to me, thank you very much. But if you look on the screen, this is just before we start dancing at hula every Monday and Wednesday, and this is down in Keaukaha. But this is our halau, and I'm just gonna quickly talk about it. But we have the tea leaf, and we have to braid tea leaf every Monday. And if you don't, then my mom charges you $5. But we have to braid tea leaf every Monday, and we have to tie it while we're doing kunihi kamauna. And while we're tying it on, what we're processing is all of the dances that we're learning at the moment and all of the dances that we learned before, and just hoping that that kupe'e is going to tie on all of those, and I'm going to remember it and not make a mistake up on top of the Merry Monarch stage. Yeah, Auntie Luana? So this is the practice, and this is the same practice that we go through every Monday and Wednesday. And before we start our practice, this is my church, by the way. I call it church. Before we start, this is how we start, by binding the Helo braid to our hands. And from this, we're going to start the art progression portion. These were the kind of things that stuck with me. It was Ohekapala, because when you make 5 years in the halau, you have to make your own bamboo stamp. And then my mom tells you, okay, here's your flounce, and it's a 10-yard flounce, and you have to stamp the whole thing with a stamp. You saw how big the stamps were. They're literally like this big. And then they're like, okay, I think I was maybe like 13 when I did my first one. They're like, okay, stamp your whole 10 yards. I was, sure, okay, we'll start right now. And then Mary Monica is creeping up right around the corner, so yeah, I have to like hurry up. There's a whole bunch of pressure on it. But that's the kind of relationship that I have with Ohekapala. And here, what we have is the braid. It's the symbolic version of this braid, the Helo braid. And it's a simple tri-braid, but what it is there any other town in Hawaii, or that fact the world, that has their name named after a braid, especially a Hawaiian name named after a braid? I just went to a Starbucks on the other island recently, and I literally felt like I was in Santa Barbara. But to me, if this is so Hawaiian, and this is so Hilo, and this Ohekapala is a representation of the Helo braid, then we are marketing ourselves, and we're putting a story that is so strong, that is so unique, that not necessarily any other place on the world can copy it. And to me, that's the strongest part of this Ohekapala. One of the interesting things about Ohekapala is, and I had to learn that the hard way, but it's not necessarily only about the positive. It's not about the solid space, the solid colors that you see. It's also about the negative colors that you see, the negative space that you see. And when you put them next to each other, does the negative space flow? Does the negative space move?
And also, the negative space is not only the people that are here, the negative space is also representation of the unseen people that are here. And so we had to space it out a little bit, just open it up. And slowly I started to think, okay, how many Hilos are there? There's Hilo One, Hilo Paliku, and Hilo Hanakahi. As we started to put it together, we realized that, wow, this is a representation of the braid. And when I was growing up, there was a lot of people that knew that story of Kamehameha making that braid, of Kamehameha's people making that braid and tying the canoe. And to me, what's beautiful about that is that it shares that same story. Now, should I go back to the other one? At the moment that this made sense to me was when I went to Hula and my cousin, who was discussing the same braid story about, my cousin took the picture and she sent it to me and she was like, look, you just showed me the logo the other night. Look what it looks like. It looks exactly like our arms bound together. Just as much as we are Hilo Hanakahi, Hilo One, and Hilo Paliku, each of us are the gateway, and each of us are the bound community within Hilo. And so lastly, to finish up the design, we had to add a few more colors. And there wasn't any other color better than gold. Hilo Paliku, Hilo One, and Hilo Hanakahi. Mahalo. I thought Paul was just going to drop the mic and walk away.